In seemingly ordinary American neighborhoods, quiet subdivisions with tree-lined streets and playgrounds, an invisible threat has lurked beneath the soil. For decades, communities lived unknowingly atop some of the most dangerous waste products ever created by human hands. Toxic chemicals, radioactive material, and industrial poisons seeped into water, air, and earth, leaving profound health impacts that are only now being fully understood. During and after World War II, urgent industrial efforts, particularly nuclear projects like the Manhattan Project, led to reckless toxic waste disposal across America. In places like St. Louis, Missouri, and Love Canal, New York, the effects have been devastating, showing the enduring human cost of environmental negligence. World War II brought a sense of unprecedented urgency to American scientific and military projects. Perhaps none was more secretive or ultimately more dangerous than the Manhattan Project, the top-secret initiative to develop nuclear weapons. It was led by the United States in collaboration with the United Kingdom and Canada. In the rush to defeat Axis powers, concerns over environmental safety were dismissed as luxuries that could not be afforded during wartime. While this was a very successful undertaking, the effects still linger today, affecting the lives of thousands of ordinary U.S. citizens who unknowingly took on the burden of the nuclear arms race. As part of this effort, St. Louis became a key processing center for uranium, a vital material for atomic bombs. Mallinckrodt Chemical Works in St. Louis processed tons of uranium ore into a form suitable for bomb making. However, in their haste, authorities did not carefully plan for the disposal of the radioactive byproducts. Instead, they stored waste material in open lots, nearby fields and creeks, with little understanding or perhaps little care for the long-term consequences. The prevailing attitude at the time was that victory justified any means. Toxicity was an abstract concern compared to the immediate, tangible threats of war. But as the world would later learn, the danger from radiation was neither abstract nor short-lived. One of the most haunting examples of this negligence is the Coldwater Creek area in North St. Louis County. After World War II, radioactive waste from uranium processing was dumped near the St. Louis airport and into nearby streams, including Coldwater Creek. For decades, families bought homes, raised children, and swam in the creek without any knowledge that the soil and water were contaminated with radioactive materials like thorium-230 and radium-226. Over time, alarming health patterns emerged. Residents experienced unusually high rates of rare cancers, autoimmune diseases, and birth defects. People who grew up near Coldwater Creek began to connect their illnesses to their childhood environments, leading to grassroots investigations and mounting community outrage. Independent studies and government investigations eventually confirmed widespread contamination. Radioactive particles had leached into the water and floodplains, especially during heavy rains and flooding events. Yet, the cleanup and accountability came agonizingly slow. Lawsuits were filed against companies like Cotter Corporation, who mishandled radioactive waste, but legal battles dragged on for years. For many affected residents, justice, if it ever came, was too late to save their health or their lives of loved ones. Just a few miles away from Coldwater Creek sits another environmental time bomb, the West Lake landfill. In the 1970s, radioactive waste from the Manhattan Project was illegally dumped into the landfill, mixed with ordinary municipal garbage. Compounding the danger, a separate underground fire has been burning for years beneath the adjacent Bridgeton landfill, threatening to ignite the radioactive materials. The situation at Westlake has sparked years of protests, community meetings, and demands for action. Residents living near the landfill report high rates of cancer and other serious health problems. Activist groups like Just Moms STL have fought tirelessly to draw national attention to their plight. In 1990, the EPA placed Westlake Landfill on its national priorities list, designating it a Superfund site. However, debates over how to safely clean up the radioactive waste have dragged on for decades. Proposals have ranged from capping the landfill to completely removing the radioactive material, a process that would be costly, risky, and politically contentious. For the people of St. Louis, Westlake is not just a toxic landfill, it is a grim testament to governmental inaction and corporate irresponsibility. It stands as a daily reminder that the aftermath of war does not always come in the form of visible ruins. Sometimes it lies buried under parks, homes, and schools. The tragedy of Love Canal in Niagara Falls, New York offers another powerful example of how toxic waste can poison communities, often going unnoticed until it's too late. In the 1940s and 1950s, the Hooker Chemical Company used the partially dug Love Canal as a dumping ground for more than 21,000 tons of toxic chemical waste. The chemicals were buried, and then shockingly, the land was sold to the local school board for just $1, with vague warnings about the buried dangers. By the 1970s, families living in the Love Canal neighborhood began to notice disturbing patterns. Children suffering from rare diseases, a surge in miscarriages, and reports of birth defects. Black sludge oozed into basements, yards emitted strange smells. When heavy rains fell, chemicals surfaced from the ground up. In 1977, investigative journalists and scientists revealed the horrifying extent of the contamination. President Jimmy Carter declared a federal emergency, the first time in American history an environmental disaster was treated as such. Hundreds of families were evacuated, and an extensive cleanup began under the newly formed Superfund program. The cleanup of Love Canal took more than 21 years and became a national symbol of corporate negligence and environmental activism. Although some homes were eventually resold, the stigma remains. Love Canal significantly altered the lives of the children and families that resided there. Sadly, St. Louis and Love Canal are far from isolated cases. Across America, a pattern emerges. Toxic waste dumped with little oversight, communities placed unknowingly at risk, and a slow, agonizing road to recognition and justice. The Hanford site in the state of Washington was a key facility in the Manhattan Project and Cold War nuclear production. Hanford leaked massive amounts of radioactive waste into the Columbia River and surrounding soil. Cleanup efforts have been ongoing for decades and represent one of the most challenging and expensive environmental remediation projects in history. Valley of the Drums Superfund Site, Kentucky. In the 1960s and 70s, tens of thousands of barrels of chemical waste were dumped in an open field, many of them leaking their toxic contents. Fires and contamination at the site helped spur the creation of the EPA's Superfund program. Times Beach, Missouri. In the early 1970s, the town contracted a waste oil hauler to spray roads for dust control. Unbeknownst to residents, the oil was contaminated with dioxin, a deadly compound. After extensive investigations, the town was declared uninhabitable and all residents were permanently relocated in the 1980s. More recently, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency discovered that from the 1930s to the early 1970s, 14 areas off the Southern California coast had been approved for dumping of military explosives, radioactive waste, and various refinery byproducts. This included 3 million metric tons of petroleum waste. This has been polluting the ocean for decades with little to no plan to clean it up. In each of these disasters, a familiar pattern repeats: profit and expedience prioritized over human life and environmental protection, leading to decades of suffering for innocent residents. The history of toxic waste in America is a history of buried dangers, of invisible threats allowed to fester beneath homes, playgrounds, and communities. From the Coldwater Creek contamination in St. Louis to the horrors of Love Canal, these disasters reveal profound moral failure, a willingness to sacrifice ordinary citizens in the name of war, industrial progress, or corporate profit.